Hi everyone, I'm Shira and I'm here with Kim, Taris, Juji, and Lee. We are five friends, speakers, and professionals from different cultures, backgrounds, and age groups coming together to offer healing and inspiration. Continuing our conversation about the power of asking the right questions, we're going to go a little deeper. It's one thing to think about asking other people questions, but it's just as important to ask ourselves. Can we think of some powerful questions to start off part two of our conversation?
I have a good question. Is that true? Just this morning, actually, a friend of mine is so struggling with somebody that she works with, a supervisor. And she has created this whole story about this person, and that if she asks that person questions, which I've encouraged her to do, about their behavior and about what they want for the department and that sort of thing, she already has it all mapped out in her mind what the answers are. So there's no point in her mind, there's no point in asking those questions because she already knows what the person's going to say.
Mm.
And so I said, okay, well, what are they going to say? And she told me. And then I said, okay, well, is that true? And she said, no, but blah, 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 blah. And she like kept going with the story that her mind created. And I said, okay, well, just let's go back to the question. Can you absolutely for certain say that you know that that is the truth? And it was the same thing. It was like, no, but blah, 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 blah. And I just wanted to shake her because I'm like, get out of your own way and listen to what you just said. You said no. So just take a second and think about that. No, that is not the truth. So if you know, some part of you knows that that may not be the truth because the person didn't actually say that to you. That's such a huge moment that I think a lot of people miss. They just kind of continue with the stories, which ends up continuing with the complaints and the unhappiness, and it just unravels and unravels.
Yeah, Juji was just talking during our little break about that exact thing. So, Juj, can you take us there a little bit in terms of like winning and needing to be right and all of that?
Right. Well, I mean, to follow up the question of, is that true? Right? Because that's technically what you're trying to get to the bottom of when you're having a conflict with somebody. But if you really ask yourself why you want to, or if you really ask yourself, do I want to resolve this or do I just want to win? Because I don't think anybody wins when all you want to do is win. The angle from which you come at any particular conflict has no real chance of being resolved when the only objective is for you to be right. And, it takes somebody very humble to admit that you were wrong about something. It takes a certain amount of courage to admit, especially in a work situation, that you made a mistake, even though we all make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard for us to apologize in an event that we hurt someone, even though you love that person and I'm sure that you didn't mean to. So it's very it's all very tied into your ego as well, in a sense that if you realize that you were in fact incorrect about a situation, then the power of questions really sort of dissolves because you're just trying to be right.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something on the heels of what Kim was talking about, which is is that true? I don't know if you guys have heard about the work of Byron Katie. She does something called The Work.
Yeah.
And she offers powerful questions to ask ourselves when we're dealing with something difficult or challenging or someone difficult or challenging. And the questions are, is that true? Right? So we kind of have to ask that right off the bat. And then the next question is, can you absolutely know that that's true? Right? So it makes you dig a little deeper. Well, maybe it's not. And then the third question is, how do you feel when you think that thought in your head? Like that person's annoying, that person didn't listen to me, that person thinks I'm incompetent, that whatever. How do you feel when you have that thought? And who would you be without that thought? So I just wanted to offer that out as maybe a conversation starter also, because when we do that, when I first learned about that, it was kind of life-changing for me, because I was like, oh, I've never even thought of asking those questions. But when you do, and you do the work, it opens up like a whole other possibility of how to look at something.
Yeah, I've actually done some of her work, and I totally agree. It not only sets you on this path of asking some, it's such a simple thing. Is that true? And when you think about it, it can have such a profound, you can come up with such a profound answer where you never would have thought of it before, because I do think that we are not always our own authentic selves to ourselves. We don't want to think that we're not, our assumptions sometimes take precedence over what the truth is.
Of course.
Yeah. And so I also think that it helps with our emotional intelligence to be asking these types of questions, to really be able to sit with ourselves and answer, is that really true? Is that person really out to get you or hurt you or whatever? And, in many cases, the answer is no. But yeah.
Taris, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I do something similar. And I learned this from a therapist. And I guess that I kept on going into the therapy office and coming and saying things that were maybe like a little crazy or like, off the wall. And he had advised me, he said, listen, while you're journaling, take out the piece of paper and put 2 columns. And if you're having a thought that you don't know what that thought is and why it's entering your space, ask yourself, is that a rational thought or is that an irrational thought? So it's kind of sort of like the truth, but it's your truth. Like, is it rational or irrational? Okay. And then what makes it whatever you choose? And then where did that come from and how does it make you feel? And I think that allows you to dive a little bit deeper into getting to the root cause of an emotion. And then you could, I know me, like now I handle every single situation totally different. Like I'm always constantly, I don't even have to write it down anymore, but I'm like, okay, rational thought, irrational thought, rational thought. You know what I mean? And it really helps you to like clear your head and like come to a situation like reasonably, which I think is pretty powerful.
You just said a key word there about your head. I think, all of these tips and ideas and stuff, it's all about just getting out of the story that is in your head, because we all know like our brains run the show. It is so difficult to get out of the story because you believe it. And most people believe their minds. Like our mind, they think it's like them. They think our mind is who I am. And so if it tells you something, then it has to be true. And then you just live in that space.
And that's how we're wired. We start to make up stories from, when we're so young and we're kind of wired to continue doing that. And until we have that awareness and we start to stop and think and, dissect it and really kind of look at it, you start to realize, exactly what you said. It's all in our mind.
Juji and I took a class called Landmark, and I was just going to say, they call people meaning-making machines. Right, Juji?
Well, and in Landmark, there is the 2 columns thing, kind of like what Taris was talking about, except that it was what happened and what you made it mean. And I think that's something that Taris said, like really, really stuck out for me. She said, my truth. And when you ask yourself questions and then you really like get to your truth, it's really sort of profound to start to understand. I'm starting to understand this now in my life, that in a relationship, whether it be romantic or friendship or family, everybody has their own point of view. And in a certain situation, there's allowed to be more than one truth. There's allowed to be more than one way of looking at it. And it's not about trying to force somebody else to see it your way. I think that love is accepting that somebody's truth is not the same as yours, and you can still coexist, and you can still respect that person, and you can still love them and deeply care for them, even though you don't see things exactly the same way. I think part of why we argue, or part of why we have conflict, is because not only do we assume that we know the answer to why they did something, but we think that they should see it exactly the way that we see it. And once you let go of that and you just protect your own truth, like setting boundaries with people and being like, you may think that there's a completely rational way of relating to me, but it doesn't feel good. So I'm going to put up this boundary and say, like, that isn't something that I accept in our relationship. Like, that's freedom. I can still love you, but I have this boundary.
Absolutely.
So good.
Totally.
I'm just loving this conversation so much because there's so many facets of it. But the thing that's coming into my mind is seek and ye shall find, right? No matter what it is, whether it's a relationship with someone else that's troubling you, or even the way we treat ourselves, or if things aren't going well in our lives and we blame ourselves and we shame ourselves and we feel guilty and all of that yucky stuff. Like, if you really want to understand yourself, you have to ask yourself questions. And, sometimes it takes people to like hit rock bottom before they're like on their knees. We've talked about this before. Like, I was in the bathroom on my knees, crying my eyes out. And then when you finally like surrender and go, I can't, help me. What am I not seeing? That's a question, right? What's the worst that could happen? That's a question we could ask ourselves. Like, there's so many questions we can ask ourselves that can lead us on a road to healing, because sometimes our truth is not the healthiest one. Like, we stick to our guns about things that are not healthy for us. It's like, we're crazy sometimes. We just really are. So I think that was the thing that came up for me, the seek and you shall find, especially when things aren't working in your life.
And actually, I really love that seek and you shall find, Shira. Like, sometimes there's people out there that just don't trust in themselves. They don't trust in their mind. They don't trust in their questions. They don't trust what is going to come out of their mind, of what they're telling themselves to do, right? So that's a whole nother issue. And I've been there before. And what I always feel helps with that situation is seek and you shall find. Maybe not in yourself, because maybe at this point you're still a little too weak, but put that into God or into the universe or into a higher power. And that is actually you. We are the universe. We are, God. We are that higher power. Like, that all lives inside of us. So I think if we kind of sort of give some of our questions up for a little bit, until we develop that truth in ourselves, then the questions we start asking ourselves actually matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I love that. Like, giving it up to another power, because so much is really out of our hands that we try to control, and surrendering to that other power, and not necessarily always having expectations. We have these expectations, and I also have practiced in my life sometimes when I remember to surrender and let it go. And that's when things start to fall into place. That higher power is working in our favor, because seek and you shall find. But sometimes when you stop seeking, it finds you.
Yeah, it comes to you.
I want to piggyback on what Juji was saying about perspective. I also think it's really important to be able to and be open to seeing things from someone else's perspective, which I think some people just are kind of very closed off to, because maybe they want to be right, or whatever. And, something that my husband and I always say, not always, but often it comes up is we just have to agree to disagree. And that's okay. It's okay to just not agree. But a lot of the time we go out of our way to see it from each other's perspective. So we'll ask questions to each other to be able to do that. And I'll just say straight to him, okay, this is the way I see it. So I need you to help me see it the way you see it. So, and then, we'll just both ask each other questions so that it can help us see where the other one is coming from. Sometimes it's easier than other times. But the other thing that I wanted to bring up, Shira, was the question that you just asked, because I think it's really in a huge, huge question. The question of is, what's the worst that can happen? And, Lee, I don't know if you want to add to this, because I know you recently had a profound experience with that question, but I just think that's so huge, because once you actually ask yourself that question and answer it, it's like you're just empowering yourself, because you're taking a little bit of you're taking the fear out of it. Because once you see what the worst case scenario is and you look that straight in the face, you're standing in a powerful place. You're in control. You're like, okay, that's what could happen. Okay, I don't want that to happen, but at least now I'm standing in a more powerful place, looking at it, saying, okay, that's over there, I'm over here. Now you can ask other questions. Now what can I do to prevent me from going over there?
Or what will I do if that does actually happen, and have a little bit of like a prep plan, depending on what it is, of course.
Right.
Or
go ahead, Lee. And in most cases, the worst that can happen is something usually, that you don't want to happen, but you're not always necessarily even close to that place. It's that fear that arises in us that makes everything sometimes seem like we're in the worst place possible. And there's always worse. And sometimes you don't want to hear that either. You're in a situation and like, oh, there's worse things that can happen. And yeah, that's true. But at the moment, this is what you're going through. But when you do think of, and yes, I'm not going to necessarily share exactly what I went through or how this related to me, but it definitely did help. And it helps to put me in my power. If this is the worst that's going to happen, thank God I am where I am, because it can be very different.
And in every aspect of your life, you can ask that question.
Yes.
The other really powerful, interesting question is, how can I show up differently in this moment? How can I, because we can change, we've talked about this too, we can change our minds at any second, right? It doesn't have to be like, I'll start next week, I'll start next Tuesday. Right now, I can change how I am looking at this. So the question, and the thing is, I have found that the more questions you ask yourself, the more easily it comes, because whether you call it God or your higher power, like for those people that don't necessarily have what we call faith or religious belief, to me, you could also look at your intuition as that higher power, because it's there. We're not always listening to it because it's like rusty from non-use, but like any practice, the more you ask and the more you're willing to hear the answer, the easier it gets. I have found that my intuition is definitely something I have honed very strongly only over the last couple of years. I don't think, to Taris's point, I was really trusting myself, and I didn't even know that I wasn't trusting myself when it came to certain really important decisions. But now that I've been asking myself and trusting myself and making decisions that serve me, it's like this begets that,
Yeah.
So I just wanted to piggyback off of something when you guys were talking about asking yourself the question, what's the worst that could happen? Like, I know that I've done that sometime with myself, and I also play that game a lot with my son. And like, he'll say something and I'll go, ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? And it's almost like you get a little giggle, because when you hear a younger person tell you their perspective of what's the worst that could happen, you're almost like, is that really bad? Like, so I think to someone's point that we spoke about it earlier on in the week, like teaching our kids to ask themselves the question of what's the worst that could happen, I think is, really important today.
Yeah, makes you think.
I just love you guys. Okay, ladies, well, I think this is a fabulous place to wrap things up. And if you love our conversations, please click like and subscribe to our channel. Tell a friend, spread the word, spread the love. If you have any comments or questions, or if you have a topic you want to see us talk about, please put it in the box below. We will see you soon. Stay safe, and we love you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.